Imagine feeling constantly on edge, as if unseen forces are tugging at your thoughts and emotions. This is the unsettling reality of psychological warfare, a kind of battle fought not with bullets, but with words, images, and ideas. For centuries, leaders have used propaganda and rumor to break enemy morale. From Cyrus the Great and Genghis Khan using fearsome rumors of invasion, to World War II armies dropping billions of leaflets promising safety to those that surrendered. At its core, psychological warfare is the use of propaganda against any enemy, intended to demoralize the enemy to break their will to fight or resist. Yet today, this concept extends far beyond the battlefield into everyday life. In this episode of Another Broken Podcast, we'll explore how psychological warfare shows up in media, personal relationships, and even our workplaces, and how we can recognize and resist it. Psychological warfare began as a wartime tool. Armies aimed to weaken opponents' resolve without fighting directly. Ancient generals spread false rumors or propaganda to frighten enemies and win battles before a shot was even fired. With modern technology, this tactic has become more systematic. Armies created dedicated PSYOP units in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam to broadcast demoralizing messages or surrender leaflets. The idea was that hearts and minds are as much battleground as the trenches. If you shatter an enemy's confidence or make them question their leaders, you've won half the war. Over time, psychological warfare wasn't just for soldiers. Governments discovered they could influence whole populations through radio and print. Think of Thomas Paine's pamphlets inspiring American colonists, or mass broadcasts stirring citizen passion. In the 20th century, businesses and ideologues also adopted these tactics. Advertising, political messaging, and social movements used emotion and repetition to sway hearts and minds. As one expert notes, propaganda plays on emotions such as frustration, anger, fear, hope, or sympathy to influence people. In short, psychological warfare evolved from a military tactic into a broad form of persuasion and manipulation in public life. The use of the phrase hearts and minds. As soldiers, we were told that we were fighting to secure the hearts and minds of the people. Looking back now, I can see the massive implementation of these tactics not only within the wars that we fought, but also on the home front to rally more troops for the cause. It almost sickens me now to think of how well it worked on me as a 17-year-old kid, filled with pride and patriotism. I was willing to lay down my life for the idea of America that I had been raised to believe in. And all that passion was used to help fulfill an unknown agenda. It feels manipulative because it was manipulative. I was just a kid. Psychological warfare isn't limited to soldiers in combat. It can appear in any setting where ideas or beliefs are targeted, and over time has found its way into many parts of our lives because it is such an effective tool for control. When it comes to military and politics, modern armies still use psychological operations, dropping leaflets, broadcasting messages, and using social media to influence soldiers and civilians. Disinformation campaigns aim to confuse or divide opponents. For example, in recent conflicts, both sides have spread fake reports to shake public trust. Research shows that intense media exposure during wartime can heighten stress. For instance, people who watch 6 or more hours a day of conflict news reported worse psychological symptoms. In politics, tactics like us versus them rhetoric or scapegoating mirror old war strategies, dehumanizing opponents and striking fear. We see it in media and public information as well. Every day we're bombarded with news and ads designed to grab attention, often by invoking strong emotions. Misinformation and infodemics, overwhelming floods of false information, can leave people anxious and misinformed. The World Health Organization warns that during health crises, false news can escalate fear and panic, and cause mental distress like anxiety, polarization, and confusion. Studies find that constant exposure to negative sensational news is linked to chronic stress and lower well-being. In social media, algorithms often keep us in echo chambers, subtly shaping our beliefs. In each case, the goal is similar to wartime propaganda: influence opinions by controlling information flow and emotions. We even see it reach out into our personal relationships and our communities. Psychological warfare can hide in seemingly ordinary interactions. An abusive relationship or bullying tactics like gaslighting, blame shifting, and isolation mirror military psyops on a personal scale. For example, a partner may repeat a lie enough so it becomes accepted as truth, or constantly invalidate your feelings to make you doubt yourself. As Preston Nye from Psychology Today observes, like psychological warfare, gaslighting falsehoods are repeated constantly to overwhelm the victim, creating confusion, anxiety, and an insecure complex. Similarly, at work, a coworker might spread rumors or belittle your contributions to undermine your confidence. One study of workplace manipulation notes tactics like dismissive language, exclusionary behavior, and disproportionate criticism as common signs of covert organizational psyops aimed to control. That doesn't just sound like narcissistic behavior, it almost defines it. In short, psychological warfare shows up whenever people use pervasive tactics to coerce or manipulate others emotionally. It could be a marketing campaign playing on insecurities, a media outlet pushing fear-based narratives, or just someone in your life twisting facts. The concepts are the same: sow doubt, amplify fear or anger, and erode trust in what you know to be true. Although there are hints of those tactics dating back to ancient times, the formalization of PSYOP's infancy only dates back to World War I. Over the last century, those tactics have spread to so many aspects of our daily lives. The global profits forecasted as a result of psychological marketing research were $140 billion in 2024. When you feel the urge to purchase something after watching an ad for it, that is part of a $140 billion a year industry. And to think that the influence of these tactics ends where we spend money would leave you vulnerable to all the other areas in which these tactics have found their way into our lives. To make this concrete, consider everyday scenarios where psychological manipulation plays out. Even in advertising, a company will repeatedly run ads that trigger fear, even in an industry as inconspicuous as insurance, using taglines like, "What if disaster strikes?" to sell their company name. Over time, you might start feeling undully anxious and unlikely risks. The advertisers have used a classic propaganda technique, playing on the emotions to influence decisions. Workplace bullying. You notice a colleague always belittles your ideas in meetings and spreads untrue rumors about your performance in order to defame your character for personal gain. These are gaslighting and scapegoating tactics. Studies show subtle bullying can undermine the victim's confidence and lead to stress or burnout. We see it in social media echo chambers. A community page only shares extreme viewpoints on a topic. The algorithms continue to push that content because of the high level of engagement keeping users on their platform. Repeated exposure starts to make those who disagree feel isolated or crazy, pushing more people to conform or stay silent. This mirrors mass propaganda's goals as making targeted groups favorably disposed to a message. Even in family dynamics, an elder family member can constantly contradict your memories of family events, insisting you remembered them wrong. Over time, you might start doubting your own recollections. This is a personal gaslighting akin to rewriting history. Some of this may sound trivial. You might be thinking, why would I be looking out in those places of my life? The person who created the psychological manipulative situation asked themselves that same question, which is exactly why you need to be cautious even in the least conspicuous areas of your life. There are lasting psychological and mental health effects to being manipulated by psychological warfare. Being targeted by these techniques can take a real psychological toll. In the short term, people often feel confused, anxious, or paranoid, similar to what happens when you're exposed to traumatic war news. For example, researchers that are exposed to violent propaganda reported nightmares and sleep problems. 71.5% had dreams about what they had seen while they were out reporting, a common PTSD symptom. They also reported heightened agitation and turned to alcohol or food for comfort, which are classic stress reactions. Over the long term, persistent exposure can lead to chronic anxiety, depression, or a sense of helplessness. Constant information can erode your sense of reality. As one Psychology Today article warns, gaslighting and lies can lead to anxiety, depression, and post traumatic stress disorder, altering an individual's perception of reality. Even when examples seem minor, the cumulative effect of doubting and fear can damage mental health. Feeling powerless to stop the bombardment of scary headlines or personal attacks often adds to stress. And expert studies can back this up. A systemic review by the World Health Organization found that health-related misinformation during crisis negatively impacts people's mental health, increasing fear and distress. Likewise, psychological research shows that media coverage of disasters and war correlates with higher stress in children and adults. Those watching more than 6 hours of conflict news had worse symptoms than those that didn't. In personal relationships, mental health experts note that manipulation like gaslighting erodes trust, undermines morale, and contributes to a toxic atmosphere, leading to emotional distress. Put simply, psychological warfare wears on the mind. Short-term effects include stress, sleep trouble, and anxiety. Long-term effects can be chronic worry, depression, or even trauma symptoms if the messages are extreme and prolonged. Recognizing these potential harms is crucial to protecting ourselves. The mental health of a population can determine a lot of things. In my opinion, due to how profitable the industry is to manipulate a population, influence their decision-making, and their overall mental state, that is the reasoning why the importance of mental health is condemned by a societal standard. The poorer the mental health is of a population, the more effective PSYOPs are. So you might be asking, Nick, how do I recognize the signs in my life? How can I tell if I've been targeted by psychological manipulation? Well, here are some of the red flags to look out for. Confusing or mixed messages. You receive conflicting information from someone, ads, news, or a person, that makes you doubt your own memory or senses. Persistent contradictions and denials may be gaslighting, which is a classic psy-war tactic. Dismissive or bullying language. People around you might dismiss your concerns as crazy or overreacting, or use sarcastic comments and exclusion. Researchers note that dismissive language, exclusionary behavior, and disproportionate criticism are subtle clues of manipulation. If you feel isolated or unjustly blamed, that's a signal. Repetition of fear or hate. You notice the same scary rumors or negative talking points over and over, whether in the media or from acquaintances. If these messages provoke anger or anxiety and are pushed to overwhelm your thinking, it resembles propaganda's repeated falsehoods intended to overwhelm the listener. Pressure to conform. You find that you're being subtly coerced to think or act a certain way. For example, being shamed for asking questions or only shown one side of an issue. Any tactic that tries to scare or guilt you into agreement is a sign of manipulation. There can be physical reactions. You feel unexplained stress, headaches, or insomnia around certain media exposure or conversations. As experts observed in trauma research, targets of intense propaganda often experience nightmares, agitation, and sleep disturbances. If you've ever felt anxious, doubtful, or drained after following the news, social media debates, or interactions with specific people, trust that feeling. It could be your mind reacting to subtle psychological tactics. Awareness is the first defense. Psychologists and researchers emphasize the unconscious power of these tactics. For example, an evolutionary science study describes propaganda as a form of soft power for authorities that can subtly shape human behaviors and beliefs by leveraging on their identity. Behavioral scientists note that messages repeating strong emotions like fear and anger are more likely to grab attention and influence attitudes. Meanwhile, workplace researchers call for education and awareness. teaching teams to recognize manipulation, promoting accountability in leaders, and fostering a culture of trust and transparency to inoculate against abuse. Statistically, the spread of misinformation is huge. The World Health Organization review found that 60% of social media content about pandemics can be false, and lying continues until it feels true. A tactic famously summed up as, if you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes accepted as the truth. These figures show the scale of battle for our beliefs, and the effort that's taken by others to win our beliefs over. We've got to protect ourselves the best that we can. While all this sounds worrying, there are steps that you can take to defend your own mind. Experts suggest to stay aware and educated. Learn how psychological tactics work. Recognize when an argument is based on emotion rather than facts. Media literacy programs and inoculation training can help you spot manipulative content before it sinks in. For instance, deliberately slowing down to question sensational headlines or checking facts with relatable resources can blunt the impacts of false messages. Limit your exposure to these things. If news or social media is stressing you out, step back. The World Health Organization notes that overloading on crisis information often increases erroneous interpretation and stress. Set healthy boundaries with media and diversify your sources so no single narrative dominates your view. Seek truth and context in what you take in. When confronted with repeating messages like news stories, ads, or rumors, actively look for credible counterpoints. If a political ad scares you, look up the data. If a coworker spreads gossip, verify before believing. Being an active seeker of truth protects you from passively absorbing propaganda. Strengthen your personal support system. Talk to friends, family, or a counselor about how you're feeling. Gaslighting and manipulation thrive in secrecy and isolation. Open conversation can confirm reality and diffuse anxiety. Mental health professionals also recommend mindfulness and stress relief activities, like exercise, hobbies, or therapy, to build resilience against fear-based tactics. Assert your boundaries. In personal conflicts, calmly document what happened and stand firm in your experiences. Like, I remember it differently. If someone constantly tries to confuse you, be prepared to distance yourself from that type of interaction. As one workplace study notes, addressing manipulation requires transparency, training, and a culture of trust on a personal level. This means that you can set clear rules like, we talk to each other respectfully around here, and refuse to engage with an aggressing opposition. Psychological warfare might sound like a term from military history, but its methods are all around us, in headlines, ads, and even in the people that we trust. The weapons are no longer just guns and bombs, but messages to convey emotion or influence actions. This episode was intended to show you how those tactics were born to break will in war, and how similar techniques can affect our minds today. By understanding these tactics and their effects, the confusion, stress, and sometimes trauma that they can cause, we become better equipped to notice them in our lives. Once again, awareness is key. Remember the signs: constant alarmist messages, repeated lies, dismissive criticism, or sudden shifts in narrative. If you feel anxious or on edge after certain media or personal interactions, you need to pause and question why. Every listener deserves mental safety. As experts say, building psychological safety through knowledge and support is the best protection. By staying curious, checking sources, and looking out for each other, we can create resilience against manipulation. Psychological warfare has always been intended to lurk behind the scenes and within the shadows of truth, but by naming it, we can disarm it. I hope today's discussion helps you recognize these hidden battles and regain a sense of awareness and peace of mind. Manipulation is one of the most powerful forms of dishonesty to endure, and facing that you have been manipulated can be extremely difficult, and in intense cases can cause an identity crisis. When I woke up to the truth behind all the lies that I was led to believe, I experienced one. There's no shame in that. After intense conditioning to any set of beliefs and confronting doubts after finally escaping the confirmation bias intended to keep you within that manipulated mindset, it is natural to feel lost and betrayed. It's a similar experience as to that of people leaving a dogmatic religion, and usually does involve a period of grief for the foundation that you just lost. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Another Broken Podcast. As always, if this episode resonated with you, share it with someone that you know. And please take the time to visit our newly redesigned website at brokenmedia1984.podbean.com, which includes the link to our new merch store with products featuring the new podcast logo. And more original designs from yours truly are soon to come as well. You can contact us by email at brokenmedia1984@gmail.com, on TikTok under the name Another Broken Dad, or just by commenting on this episode. Whatever way, you know that I would love to hear from you. Stay vigilant and remember that your mental health is so important. Until next time, I'm Nick Taylor. Have a good one, guys.